Hey, folks, welcome to TwoX Labs, a podcast that gets you CEUs. So I'm so glad that you're here. I'm so glad that you're joining us. We're going to be talking all things purity culture and how therapists and other healthcare providers can help deconstruct it. I have brought you a friend, a colleague, an incredible human being, Dr. Andreya Jones, therapist and AASECT Certified Clinical Sexologist, but I get to call her Dreya. Thank you for being on the show, Dreya. I'm just so glad you're here.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So we're gonna jump right in. I really want to make sure that everybody knows where we're headed so that they understand the terms we're gonna be using. So obviously, for all the listeners, you know that when we say AFAB, it's assigned female at birth. So we're essentially talking about cis women and all other identities. And but we really want to talk about today what purity culture is and how it manifests in people's lives, specifically for AFAB individuals. Can you give us a little bit of a rundown for that?
Of kind of what it is.
Yes.
So purity culture was created after the sexual revolution, after the 60s and 70s, and by the Christian evangelical church. And so basically they started to panic because women had sexual freedom, and they were like, oh no, we're going to lose the traditional white family, right? We need to keep having babies, to have them go to church, to pay to keep the church going, right? And so they started this focus on purity and modesty, and how as women, our greatest gift is our purity and our virginity. And that ultimately, our goal as women is to marry a really great Christian man. And wait to have sex until we get married. And then we're going to get married to this amazing white Christian man. We're going to have the best sex of our life. And then
despite knowing nothing.
Right. We're going to have babies, and we're going to keep the church going. Right.
Yes.
And so it really became that women's bodies were a commodity. Right. And we weren't even allowed to think about pleasure or sex. Masturbation wasn't okay. Exploring our own bodies was not okay, until we got married. And then our partner, who was always going to be a guy, was going to figure it out. And so it just blew up, right? So in the 90s and the early 2000s, we had things like Silver Ring Thing and True Love Waits. And they just kind of went all over the world and all over the country talking about the importance of virginity and purity, and saving yourself for marriage.
The audience is going to hear me taking deep breaths through this entire episode because you are describing my childhood. I was raised in a very rural, evangelical, Christian household. And so when we're talking about women, we're talking about cis women, and that this was a very specific, heterosexual dynamic and white dynamic that was very, very intentional. My father definitely handed me a purity ring. There was dances devoted to this, and this is I would even say late 80s was part of it too. I was born in 84, and this was part of my entire childhood. And I should also say, Dreya you did your entire dissertation about this. This is coming from deep research. Even though I'm over here, I've got to take deep breaths because I got personal experience, because we're talking about trauma that I've experienced. So the systems that you're kind of talking about, I think we'll probably explore a little later, but the whiteness system, the system of control inside of the church, and specifically cis women and having more children to have more members of a church is what we're talking about. Correct?
Right. And how women were responsible for the sexual purity of an entire community. So not only did we have to protect our own sexual purity, right, in our thoughts and our bodies, everything. We also were the gatekeepers, the sexual gatekeepers for
Mm,
the men in the community. So, like, if we
yeah.
wore something inappropriate that caused them to lust, then it was
Yes.
our fault, right? Which is kind of it correlates with the rape culture as well, right? Which is
Hmm.
when a woman gets sexually assaulted, often the first question asked is, well, where were you? What were you doing? What were you wearing?
Hmm.
Right. And
How were
so
you responsible
yes,
for the cis man's behavior, his fallenness? You are the temptation. And I know we're going to get into deeper a little bit later of how this showed up and still shows up in public school uh why can't I, the words all completely left me, probably because I'm trying to manage a trauma trigger. uh the dress codes, like the you can't show your shoulder, there's a spaghetti strap, sweet goodness, you are tempting the boys.
right. And they in purity culture, right? There's this
Yes.
actual teaching and belief that men are sexual creatures and beings and they can't control themselves. And so it is our job as cis women to protect ourselves and them from themselves, right? So there's
Yes.
really no ownership there on the men. It's our job as women.
Yes. Oh, like I'm just having so many flashes of memories, but also flashes of memories of treatment that I have done in the past. And as Drea knows, and many of the listeners knows, I did sex offender treatment for a long time, and this, like the echoes of this, have long outlived the this just being in a very specific church setting. Can you talk about like how this this manifests in other parts of our culture, and talk about like how does this live on with people long after they've left environments that have created them?
I mean, it's definitely in hookup culture,
Whew.
on like all the apps and stuff, because I think women, at least, I'm not on the apps right now, but my clients have told me like the expectation is that women are going to have sex with these men right away.
Hmm.
They have to use their sexuality in order to like get attention, but then you can't have too much sexuality, right? Because then you're kind of like a whore. And so it's trying to navigate again, how do I use my sexuality to get what I want, but I can't go too far. It's like the Madonna whore type of thing, right?
Yes, the go, and also like Goldilocks, right? Like you gotta, it's gotta be just right. And if you fail, fuck you. You're getting eaten by a bear.
Right. So I think it's definitely in the dating world. It is still in schools, right? I have two kids and they have a dress code in public school. Like my
Hmm.
daughter, who's 7, can't wear spaghetti straps. She has to have shorts a certain length. And yet my son doesn't have, you know, any rules about what he can and cannot wear. And so
Hmm.
it's in that as well. I think it's in a lot of marriages, just the expectation that, sex is going to be amazing and that women and men should naturally know exactly what to do sexually. Like
Mm.
I see in your sex therapist, so you probably see this too. It's like everyone goes into these relationships and thinks it's going to be magical and it's going to work out
Right.
perfectly. And the thing
Yes.
is, communication is lubrication. If we aren't communicating about what we like, what we want,
Hmm.
how the heck are we going to have amazing sex? But there's this
Correct.
idea that if we're meant for each other, it just magically happens. And then when it doesn't, we feel like we're broken or there's something wrong
Hmm.
with us.
Yes.
So I see it a lot in relationships as well.
Yes. Before we started recording, I was telling you that I'm teaching a human sexuality class at my alma mater, which is a Christian university, and it is the students are so desperate for the information. They're desperate for it. And yet when we try to have like open conversations, like and have events, the administration, specifically like the chapel, will say things like, oh well, you need to make sure that you bring in the Christian perspective, without like actually saying what that means. And I think it does have these roots. It does have the roots of purity culture. And I just want to say out loud, just so that everybody listening, Dre and I's purpose here isn't to bring you away from whatever faith you're in. It's for you to be curious about toxic theology that is impacting the people that we're working with and impacting them in really, really vast ways. Especially as sex therapists, is probably, I would say, not just purity culture, but religious practices from lots of different religious practices are one of the number one ways that I see people really struggling with their sexuality. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And then in the training to become a certified sex therapist or to get your PhD in clinical sexology, at least when I was going through it,
Mm-hmm.
there were very few courses on the impact of religion or spirituality or faith
Yes.
on who we are as people and who we are as sexual beings, which is why I did my dissertation, because I saw that this was lacking in the education. And so I'm actually having a book published in January that's
Woohoo.
written for therapists who are working with this specific population, because when you work with this population, you have to understand the language. You have to
Yes.
understand where they're coming from. And remember, in many religions, we are taught that anyone outside of our religion is dangerous. And
Yes.
so if they are willing to come see a therapist who's
Mm-hmm.
outside of their faith, that's a huge step. And
Yes.
then if that therapist isn't able to meet them where they are or
Mm-hmm.
accept them for where they are, whether the therapist agrees with it or not doesn't matter, then
Right.
we've lost that client and we shut them
Yes.
down and we reinforce the belief that, oh, just keep it all inside, keep it in the faith, keep it in the family, right? Outsiders are dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And so I totally agree with you. Like, we need more education for mental health and medical professionals who are working with a specific population.
Yes. I'm trying to imagine like how difficult it would be to go ask your OBGYN questions if you don't even know where to begin because you've never even looked at the outside of your vulva or you've been told it's dirty and fallen and sinful. Like it does prevent of so many things from happening, even to create like physical health and sexual health. So there's so many barriers you've already described, but just so that we can teach everybody who's listening, like what are some of those most common issues that kind of come to you when clients are like you start to see the effects. They're describing the effects of purity culture and you're hearing them. What are some of those effects that you see when they come into your office?
Like, what's happening in their life because of
Mhm.
purity culture?
Yes.
Um, One of the big ones is that vulva owners in particular believe that pain is part of sex and that it's
Mm.
expected and that it's just something they have to push through. And unfortunately, I mean, I live in rural, like PA in
Mhm.
Pennsylvania, so
Mhm.
not in a city or anything, but like a lot of the gynecologists in this area have told my clients, like, just push through the pain, eventually it'll feel better. Well, obviously that's causing trauma, right?
Yes.
And so I work with a lot of vulva owners who really experience a lot of pain, and they don't know that that's, unless you really want pain, like if that's your kink, cool. But
Right.
like, if you don't want it, then it shouldn't be part of your sexual experience, but
Yes.
they just accept it. The other thing I see is that there's just no education. So they don't
Yes.
know that the clitoris, first of all, if they know there's a clitoris, they don't know that it has legs. Um,
Mhm.
they don't know how, I've had clients who thought they were having sex, but they weren't putting a, they were trying to get pregnant and they thought they were having sex, but they weren't having sex the way you could get pregnant. And
Yes.
so educating them, like, this is where we put this, like, if you want to have a baby, And
Mhm.
then lots of clients who just have no libido, no interest
Mhm.
whatsoever in sex because they don't know what pleasure is for them.
Right.
They don't know how to give themselves pleasure.
Mm.
And, then they're having the sex they don't want to have. And so if you're
Yeah.
having sex you don't want to have, of course you don't have interest in it, right?
Right.
And so these are just some of the things I see on a daily basis with my clients. I'm not sure what you're seeing with yours.
I mean it's pretty identical because it's I think a lot of us sex therapists see people who are I know that I advertise because I've taken specific trainings and on high control religions and cults, and when you're trying to leave organizations like that, it is very, very difficult, and what they people will ignore about their bodies because they've been taught that they were just absolutely dirty. Hold on one second. My husband is looking at me. Oh, he's leaving. Okay, I can cut this out for just one second.
Okay, and the connection isn't really good right now.
You're actually
I keep
good.
losing you.
It's showing me that it's uploading. It's showing me that it's a pretty good connection. Come here. You
Oh,
can come in.
okay.
I'm gonna cut this part out. My kiddo's leaving for a trip.
Love you.
Oh, I love you.
Mm,
Have so much fun.
okay.
And I got Cooper.
Mhm.
I ordered his meds.
Okay.
They should be here tomorrow. We'll start him. And guess what? 85% cure rate. Not 50-50, but 85%.
So it's not a coin flip.
No, not a coin
Good.
flip.
So that means
I love you so much.
I do.
I'll help get her out because she will bark. You know? No. I want to go. I can edit things. We're good. Oh, you hear me okay?
Yeah, you've been going in and out and I can't really see you, but
Oh, interesting. Because
it's okay. I can hear you. We'll just
it
go for it.
says it does say actual recording is higher quality. So
Yeah.
I think it's getting it because it's not telling me that there's any connection problems on my end, at least.
Okay.
Fingers crossed. If all else fails. So, uh, we were at the place where we were talking about what we were seeing in our clients. I'll bring us back in.
Okay.
So, harm will actually come to their bodies, or something like physical will be going on, like endometriosis, or they actually are dealing with scar tissue, or they're dealing with some other medical issue. But when they've been taught to ignore their body or ignore pain, those problems go on for years and years and years because no one is investigating further. So I think we both are seeing very, very similar things, really, regardless of the religious practice.
Right.
Yes, purity culture starts with the evangelical church, but we see a lot of this kind of high control of like cis women and other AFAB identities. And what it results in is that they don't get proper medical care. They don't get proper mental health care. They don't get proper sexual health care. And so I know that we just are hearing echoes from one another and other colleagues in our field, that we just see this again and again and again.
Mhm.
So, one, we're seeing sexual dysfunction.
Mhm.
Are you getting couples that are willing to deconstruct this in your practice? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So a lot of my clients that struggle with vaginismus,
Mm-hmm.
um, bring their male partners in.
Mm-hmm.
And what we start to realize in our work together is that oftentimes these men are struggling with sexual dysfunction as well. Right. And so whether that's premature ejaculation or erectile
Mm.
dysfunction, or even just a fear of sexually like having sex with their partner or playing sexually because what if I hurt her, right? And so there's this
Mm.
performance anxiety, and so I work a lot with these particularly heterosexual couples in this situation, and we really have to talk about like wh um what are the core messages that you
Mm,
received about your
yes.
body, about sexuality, about pleasure, about your role as
Mm,
a man or a woman, or right, like your gender, like all of that stuff, and how is that showing up in the bedroom?
mm-hmm,
And how is it playing off of one another, right? And are you guys communicating about it, or is there so much guilt or shame around it
mm-hmm,
that we're just keeping it in and just going through the motions and doing the best that we can? And so, what I've found is that when we can get the conversation going and we can put the guilt or the shame on the table, and they both realize this isn't a one person issue, this is a
mm-hmm.
both of us issue, and we can be a team to work through it and to support one another and not live in silence, which is where shame grows, which a lot of
Yes.
religions love that whole thing with keep it
Mm-hmm.
silent, keep it in, so the shame is there.
Yeah.
Then you really see these couples blossom and work together. And all of a sudden, the sexual dysfunction or the pain begins to subside.
Yeah.
And we redefine what sex can look like sometimes, especially for people with endometriosis. Like this whole PIV, that's how we define sex. Like sex is so much bigger than that. It's a spectrum. Like we can experience pleasure in so many different ways. And so helping these couples redefine what pleasure is, what sex is, um,
Yes.
in those moments when your penis isn't going to do what you want it to do, like we have other things to go to.
Yes. And I'm really keying into what you said about shame
Mhm.
and how shame is a tool by many religions, but specifically in purity culture to, I think the intention is to maintain control, but ultimately, like the way that it falls out is that the when people actually really start to question it, it does entirely the opposite. It doesn't maintain the control. People end up miserable and they don't enjoy sexual experiences, and then so they have less sex or no sex. Like you described, they don't even necessarily know how to have a baby if that's what they're trying to do. So when we're thinking about how we can support therapists in this world, uh, uh, let's talk about like some of the first steps like that they could take in kind of deconstructing what purity cultures maybe even looks like for them,
For the client or for the therapist?
for the therapist, because we got to do our own work first.
Right. Um, so I would definitely take the time to think about like what are the messages that as therapists we've received
Hmm.
growing up, but also in our education. And just really figure out like what am I comfortable with? What am I not comfortable with? If there's something I don't understand, I need to, as a therapist, go do the research to figure out what that is. Um,
Hmm.
don't just go in there and wing it, right? If
Correct.
if a client asks a question or uses a definition or a word that you don't understand, let them know that you don't understand and then go do the work to figure out what that is.
Hmm.
Um, I think just as therapists being very self-aware of our biases and where we're coming from, because I don't care how long you've been doing therapy, we all are biased people and we all have
Yes.
our own shit and our own trauma. And if
Hmm.
you have religious trauma, if you grew up in this, you need to figure out what are my triggers? What are the things
Yes.
that I struggle with? Because how am I going to hold space for someone else if I don't know how to like sit with it with myself?
Absolutely.
So lots of work on yourself before you go into that situation because you will be triggered.
Yes, absolutely. I having started this episode by describing some of my own religious trauma, having gone through a lot of purity culture, a lot of the work that I had to do when I was deconstructing a lot of the toxic theology that I experienced growing up actually came, yes, at my alma mater, but also the therapy work that I did. my alma mater did Whitworth University did a wonderful job in allowing me the curiosity to deconstruct toxic theology. They let me ask questions of what that could look like in a space of self-exploration and what that could look like when I was building something else inside of my own life. Therapy helped me understand what the triggers would look like when I'm looking at clients who I'm working with some of the same issues that I've already tackled. So I think what you're saying is so very important, that a therapist really does have to dig inside of themselves before they start this work because of the harm that can be done. Have you seen clients come to you after they've seen another provider with harm? Have you seen that come into your practice?
Sorry, you cut out. Have I seen?
Uh, have you seen clients come to you after they've seen another provider that has done harm?
Yeah, unfortunately, I have tons of clients who have been harmed by medical professionals, but also mental health professionals. And I think part of that is we have to remember as clinicians that there is a power dynamic in that room.
Yes.
And for people who grow up in highly controlled religious environments, they're so used to the power dynamic. But we have to be careful that we don't become another person that's telling them what's right or wrong, right? Or how
Mm.
to have sex, like there's a right or wrong, or what to believe and what not to believe. And so when they go to therapists, who are just like, well, that's crazy. Why do you believe that? Or just change your perspective, or that's not the right definition for that. Like, they're so used to being controlled that it creates the
Mhm.
same dynamic that they're coming from
Yes.
in the therapeutic space. But then how are we going to grow in a therapeutic space where I don't feel safe to use my voice if I'm the client, right?
Hmm.
And so I see this all the time with my clients. And so what I work really hard on with people who come from this culture is to ask them, just keep putting it back on them. Like, what is your definition of this? How does it feel in
Mm.
your body? What do
Mm.
you desire? Right? Because I'm not here to tell them what the answer should be.
Mhm.
Everything they grew up with is like, look to someone else who has the power to tell you what to think and feel. I
Yes.
cannot be that as a therapist. And so when you empower them to have a voice, that's when they
Mm.
begin to deconstruct, because they realize, oh my gosh, not only do I have a voice, but
Mhm.
someone cares and they want to know what I have to say.
Yes. I just want to say it is really wonderful when you're sitting with a client for that to start to happen and to watch it and get to be part of that process. But I think it's important for us to mention it's not always a smooth process. It's not always a when they actually feel safe to explore themselves and that you are not this authority over the top of them telling them what to do. Sometimes that is destabilizing on its own of their emotions because they're questioning everything that they have learned since they were children. So what does it mean if this isn't the only truth? The thing that I heard from maybe pastors or family members or people around me, even friends, if this isn't the case, what am I going to lose?
Mhm.
So what do you see clients grappling with when it comes to the losses they have when they start to deconstruct?
So, one of the beautiful parts of being a part of a religious community
Hmm.
is the community,
Yes.
because you feel supported and loved and you don't feel alone. And so for those of us that choose to leave or choose to deconstruct or change in any way, the risk is losing your entire support system.
Yes.
And that's why a lot of people just stay, because how am I going to live in a world where I don't have the community to support me? Right.
Mm.
And so that is definitely something that I see come up. Um, and then what's another loss? I think just also the loss of there's safety in always being
Mm.
told what to do. Like,
Yes.
I'm not saying it's healthy, but there is safety because I don't have to make decisions. Like, you tell me what to do, and
Yes.
there's no ownership then in my decision. It's because of you. And so
Hmm.
losing having someone to tell you how to live your life and what is right and what is wrong is really hard for a lot of people to lose that as well.
Well, it's scary if you have already like if you start to lose like, oh, I knew the answer if something that came in front of me like an identity I didn't understand, like somebody who's trans is coming into the church, or if somebody in my life has said something and I know where to turn to get the answer, and then you're starting to question where you would get answers before, that can be incredibly terrifying
Yeah.
and can feel like a massive loss. And it also can feel like a massive loss of power.
Hmm.
How do you help them start to deal with the power differential, maybe even in a couple, or the loss of having, if they do leave that religion, the loss of having an all-powerful God tell them what to do? How do you help them cope with that?
So honestly, I encourage them to find other people that are on a similar journey.
Yeah.
Because we all as humans, I think, I mean, of
Hmm.
course there's the outliers, right, who don't need community, but
Hmm.
as people, most of the time we need to feel like we're not alone, we're not weird, we have a support system. And so it's saying like, okay, even if you've lost this support system,
Right.
where can we find community
Yes.
so that you aren't alone, right?
Hmm.
And that's just, I think, when you know you're not alone, that's when you're able to like breathe and feel safe,
Yes.
because we all have those questions. And so that's another reason why that in my dissertation, I wrote a curriculum that was for groups, right, of women, because
Mm.
I don't want to do it one-on-one because I want to build the
Exactly.
community.
Exactly. That makes tons of sense. So you're creating, as you're doing the clinical work, you're creating the community within it so that they can feel less alone and have that built-in people to talk to about that process and what those feelings feel like.
Yeah.
I mean, I do something similar with my neurodivergent groups, is that then they get to see other neurodivergent people where they may not have a neurodivergent person in their lives, that they can be talking about what this feels like. So I think that that perspective makes a lot of sense. What did you notice? I mean, I'm sure you went through all these parts of this curriculum. What were some of the parts that were the most difficult in your curriculum for the clients to deal with?
Honestly, it was the anatomy part
Oh,
and
wow.
the masturbation and pleasure and
Mm,
learning about your body. That was the
mm,
hardest part, because it required them to not only think outside of the box that they had been handed, but also
mhm,
required them to explore their bodies, which for many of them had been shamed,
mm,
and they were like they viewed their body as dirty and not their own property, and like that men are
yeah.
entitled to it and that only
Right.
men know, what I want or what I need. And so
Mhm.
pushing them or encouraging them to have bodily autonomy and to be curious about their own bodies and to look at their vulvas, right? To learn about the all the different parts of the vulva and the vagina. That
Mhm.
was the hardest, again, because they weren't educated. And so,
Yes.
I had, 60, 70-year-old women who had no
Mhm.
idea where the clitoris was, let alone that
Yeah.
the clitoris was more than a tiny little thing, right?
Yeah.
Um, so that was really, really hard for most of the clients. But then what was so awesome is that when they began to embrace their bodies and learn about it,
Yeah.
they got really excited. And
Mm.
it was kind of like this new world that they got to discover.
Mhm.
So it was really fun to see them blossom.
That's That's really lovely to hear, like this transformation that they would start to have, and that education and a gentle, compassionate education could open up their worlds like that. What did you see, like they if they went back to partners, did they get negative feedback, or did it improve their relationships? Mixed bag? What do you think?
I have had a number of angry partners
Yeah,
reach
I
out to
bet.
me, whether that's on email or
Hmm.
text message. I've had a couple ask to come to sessions with me to tell me and educate me about how what I was teaching or whatever their wives or their girlfriends was not acceptable.
Hmm.
So yeah, I had a lot of particularly male partners who were not pleased with me because
Mm,
I'm empowering these women, right? And so
yes.
oftentimes in highly controlled religious culture, the man is the head of the household.
Hmm.
He has more power. His opinion matters more. His needs matter more. And so when you begin
Hmm.
to empower the wife or the girlfriend,
Yes.
right? All of a sudden, it's not working the way that the church or, I think it should work. And so then they lash out at the therapist. Um,
Yes.
I did have also had lots of partners who were excited, because maybe
Mm,
their wife for the first time experienced an orgasm or
yeah.
enjoyed having sex or opened her eyes during sex, right?
Yeah.
Like, and they got this level of vulnerability and transparency and intimacy that they
Mm.
had never experienced before.
I can just hear such diverse experiences for you as the clinician. Uh, I imagine you questioned your life when the angry ones would show up in your office. Uh, how did I am kind of curious. How did you navigate the the angry one, the one who's challenged by the power differential changing? How did you handle that as a clinician?
So, because I grew up in this culture,
You know the
I'm a missionary.
language.
I'm a
You know.
missionary kid. I know
Yep.
the language. I know the dynamic. I know that when they come in this anger and this ego, if I
Hmm.
come at them with
Hmm.
intelligence or knowledge or like facts, um,
Yes.
I'm going to lose them. Right. And
Yes.
so I would literally just sit there very kindly, open,
Hmm.
like, tell me why you're upset,
Hmm.
like curious about what's happening for them. And
Hmm.
so it almost in a kind of fucked up way, they felt like they were in control, which is what they like.
Yes.
And then I would get them down, right? And they would start to
Hmm.
emotionally regulate. And that's when I would start to just kind of kindly ask questions, right? And be like, well,
Yes.
that's a really interesting perspective. And I totally get, where you're coming from. And I get that Bible verse. And you're right.
Hmm.
Like, I get it. Another option or
Hmm.
another idea would be blank, right? And maybe we can both exist in this world. We don't have to agree.
Yeah.
This is my perspective and this is yours, and mine is not better
Hmm.
than yours, and yours is not better than mine, right?
Yeah.
And so, really trying to let them come in there, speak their truth, get it out, feel
Hmm.
like they're in control, and then I would start to have those conversations. Because
Yeah.
if I went in with any sense of like authority, I would lose them.
Yes, absolutely. You are talking about a strategy that I had to use in the prison setting all of the time with the sex offender clients that I had, because it really fundamentally we want to, like, especially on the internet, people want to have those gotcha moments, right? Like, to like, I know more than you lose, I win. But if you're going to make any difference in a relationship, you have to handle it with a level of compassion that is incredibly difficult to access as a clinician sometimes. And that's what I hear you doing, which is, okay, I'm going to help them regulate their emotions, and then we're going to have a conversation. then we might get to education. But at minimum, you want to get to we can try to have a conversation
Right.
without this power differential being the goal.
Right.
I think it's just wonderful what you are trying to navigate with these clients. So for the therapists that are listening, let's talk about some practical strategies that they can really help their clients start the deconstruction process and to heal from its effects.
Okay. So my favorite activity to start with after your initial couple sessions, right? Like getting all the information, is I use something that Emily Nagoski has in Come As You Are, which is the whole garden analogy, right?
Mm.
And so talking about like if we are each a garden, we are just a plot
Mhm.
of land, right?
Mhm.
And throughout our life, from media, from the church, from your family of origin, whatever, they start to plant beliefs or ideas or truths into your garden.
Mhm.
And so, what I have them do is identify, we actually color the gardens, right? We make the
Love it.
gardens, and because I'm a visual learner and that's what I like.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
we label each plant, and I have
Mhm.
them decide, like maybe this is a cactus and this is,
Mhm.
whatever, arugula, I don't know.
Mhm.
But like they begin to like draw what has been planted in them. And then we look at each belief, each thought, each truth, and we ask this question. Is this adding to the quality of my life, or is it not? And even
Mm.
if it added to the quality of my life when I was 20 or I was 12, is it adding to it now? And then it's reminding them and letting them know that you have the power to take out that plant or to plant something new. And
Mhm.
so we begin to talk about like, what do you want in your garden? And then how can we remove some of the things that aren't adding to the quality of your life anymore?
Mm.
And I have found that because this isn't just like talking and intellectual, like thinking and all that stuff,
Yeah.
it's coloring, it's mixing everything. I have
Mhm.
way better results because people start to look at their garden, and then I say to them, if they're parents, would you ever want your child to have this garden?
Mm.
And this is
Whew.
when women in particular begin to sob. Because if they
Wow.
have little girls or little boys or,
Mhm.
you know, children at all, they don't want their children to have that garden. And so
Yeah.
if this garden would not be okay for your children, why is it a garden that we allow to be in your life?
Yeah. And that you can, I love, I'm getting all the narrative therapy feels over here. I can hear the allowance for like helping them. You're holding space, but you're also allowing them to process in a multi layered way. It isn't just a intellectual discussion. It isn't just like I'm going to teach you the atomic education that you never got. It's no, you're going to actually like have a garden you're going to build, and with the idea that you can rebuild it.
Yes. And you can keep whatever you want in there. Like, I'm
Mm.
not here to tell you that that cactus doesn't belong. If you
Right.
like that cactus, then you keep that in your garden because you get to decide that, right? Which again
Yeah.
is for people who don't want to leave religion, they don't want to leave the
Mm-hmm.
church. That's okay, right?
Yes.
Like keep your cactus. Totally cool,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Exactly. If the cactus works, if it works in your life, in your garden, keep
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
and it gives that, again, you're challenging the idea of the power differential as well in this example. You're also allowing them the autonomy of their own garden and that they have the power over it. It really is, and such a lovely, I love that activity. What is there a next step for therapists after that? Like, where are you usually taking them? Obviously, you're not going to get through the entire thing. This is a long process for clients, but where therapists can start, this is going to be, I think, really helpful for them.
So one of the other things that I do, particularly with vulva owners,
Hmm.
is a lot of times they are completely disconnected from their
Mm,
bodies, right?
yeah.
Because their bodies were dangerous or, could cause them to sin. Like we learned, especially in purity culture, to shut down the body and to just stay up here, right?
Right.
And
Yes.
so a lot of just traditional sex therapists would walk into that room and be like, well, have you looked at your vulva before? Like, have you masturbated? And for these people, they don't even allow themselves to connect to their body, let
Yes.
alone, like look at it, right?
Don't even get me
So
started on the eating disorders I see in wrapped in right here. Like, because there's no, like, the pleasure part, sexual or non-sexual, is a threat.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because pleasure is what, if we pursue pleasure outside of Christ, right?
Yeah.
That can be a sin because it's taking
Hmm.
us away from the ultimate goal, which is to evangelize, to bring people to Christ, like all those things. So
Hmm.
pleasure is dangerous outside of God, the pleasure you get from your relationship with God. So one of the activities that I have my clients do to just begin to connect with their body before we ever do anatomy, right? Or
Hmm.
masturbation is
Yeah.
every morning when they're in bed and they're comfy and they're snuggled up and they're in their jammies, I have them place their hand over their vulva
Hmm.
and say hello. And so we
Mm.
allow the vulva to feel the warmth of the hand. We say hello, like good morning. You are deserving of pleasure, or hey, I'd like to get to know you, like whatever comes, right? We
Hmm.
acknowledge her and we connect with her. Because
Hmm.
if we've separated, here from the rest of our body, then the rest of our body doesn't trust us. And if my
Yes.
body doesn't trust me, my body's not going to trust anyone I let into it.
That's right.
And so we're building connection between the client and their body,
Hmm.
creating trust so that then if they choose to invite someone else into the body or to touch the body goes, oh, it's okay because, I trust Drea. You might, if it's my
Hmm.
body, I trust Drea. So whoever Drea invites in, I'm gonna try to trust too.
Yeah.
And so slowly creating connection between them and their body. I also focus on what gives you pleasure. So they do a
Hmm.
pleasure journal. So French
Mm.
fries give me pleasure. My cat gives me pleasure. The rainbow gave me pleasure. And I
Hmm.
make them look for pleasure and write it down. And then when we come up with some good stuff, they have to intentionally incorporate that pleasure in their daily, weekly, monthly lives
Mm.
because pleasure in general is dangerous for them, let alone
Yes.
even going to sexual pleasure.
Right. Right. So sexual pleasure is like 10 steps down the path. You got to start way back further.
Yep.
Which makes tons and tons of sense. Like, if we think about like how the threat system works, like when we're in fight or flight or freeze, we're not pooping, we're not eating, we're not generally having sex, but and if that is where we are when we're trying to engage with our body or pleasure at all, it's just not going to go well. It's not going to go well.
Right.
So, uh, when you start to see uh some turning points for clients, I'm sure it's a variety of things, but like, are there things that you notice in general that tend to be more of a turning point for clients than others?
I think when they when they feel safe in their own body, even if
Yeah.
it's just, I let myself not be busy today and sit on the porch and have a cup of coffee that gave me pleasure. And I don't
Mm.
let myself do that because remember, we're taught to be human doers, go, 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 but we're
Yep.
supposed to be human beings, right? So when they learn how to stop, to slow down, to be present, to connect with their own body, and the
Mm-hmm.
world doesn't collapse and they don't fall apart,
Yeah.
and God doesn't strike them dead, like when they do that, that's when I begin to see the change.
Yeah. So they start to connect not only just to the body, but they're connecting to the, oh, I don't have to be in constant motion.
Yes.
That's I think helpful because I think you're identifying some of the distraction too that is used to try to avoid the shame, avoid the body, avoid pleasure, avoid and only focus on God, only focus on this relationship or and any other religious, only focus on being right, be doing right, uh, producing only what God or any of what other religions would want them to focus on.
Right.
So, coming back to therapists, how can we? I know that we probably both have tons of thoughts on this. This is a more general umbrella question. How do you think we can? I think sex therapists we can be in a unique place to help other therapists. How can we help other therapists kind of shift to a more sex positive or even neutral mindset as clinicians? How do you think we can help them do that?
It's a really hard question for me,
I know.
because at least where I live,
Yeah.
I'm the only certified sex therapist in this area, and
Yep.
all the therapists that aren't sex therapists are, not all of them, but a big number, a vast majority of them are scared to even talk about sex. So they refer all the people to me to talk about sex.
Yes.
And
Wow.
so it's like they have their real therapist and then they have
Yes.
Drea, right?
Yeah.
And so how do we help normal everyday therapists be comfortable with their own sexuality and how to
Yeah.
talk about sexuality? And the
Yeah.
main problem I see is there isn't, like when I went through grad school, there was not one single class on human sexuality. So going into
Yep.
therapy, I was like, I gotta wing this shit, right? And then I
Hmm.
sought out all the education and became a sex therapist. But normal everyday therapists aren't trained on, to
No.
even talk about sex. So
Yes.
we have to change the education system,
Hmm.
but the education system seems to be scared to talk about sex too. So I think it just
Yes.
goes way back. Like if we're not teaching kids in high school, like
Hmm.
healthy sexuality, then they go to
Hmm.
college, they don't get it in college, they go to grad school, they don't get it in grad school, and then they're in front of a client and they're like, oh shit, this person has sex with balloons and I don't know what to do.
Yes.
We lose them. So I don't have like a magical answer other than I think we need more education.
Yes, and to start earlier. I think
Yes.
you're right. I do think like some of the this is just my bias. I think that some of the advocacy as sex therapists that we can do is be those instructors. So like I am the human sexuality and professor at my university, and I'm willing to go talk to every therapist in town. I don't care because I really don't want them to just send me people who just need a very basic conversation about sex in their whatever's going on. I mean, as all of us sex therapists know, it's never like people think that we're going to give somebody 5 steps to get achieve orgasm. Like that's really it really it doesn't look like that. Uh but I think that we can be as sex therapists be the uh the harbingers of a sex positive world. At least that's my imaginary little place I'd like to live.
I totally agree with you. Like I have connected with a ton of the different hospitals in this area. I have gone in and given talks, like
Love it.
given my time for free to go like educate
Yes.
about what we do. I have lots of therapists who have contacted me in the area and said, tell me about what you do. And I have this really great website for my business that really talks about what we do. And I agree with you. Like, we as sex therapists really need to be out there advocating and teaching and giving our time to
Yes.
say, like, hey, we can all talk about sex on some level. If it's a
Hmm.
really hard thing, like, yeah, we can handle it. But like just general stuff, how can I help you? What tools can I give you? What books and resources can I connect you with so that
Yes.
you as a clinician aren't so nervous about this topic and you can talk to your clients about it?
Yes, I am right there with you, my friend. I mean, also, spoilers, I don't even think I mentioned it in the beginning. We went to the same PhD program, and that's how Dre and I met. So we're buddies outside of this, so we could be here all day. Uh, give us the first time Dre and I met was right before the pandemic, when we thought our program was going to be hybrid. And we got to sit on a beach and eat together and decide whether or not we wanted to actually take a bite of a PhD program or not. And then we agreed to be in a PhD program, and we all went inside and didn't come out for 2 years. So I just so appreciate your wisdom, and I just so appreciate your willingness to bring this education to all other kinds of mental health providers and medical providers. Do you have any like final advice or thoughts for therapists or healthcare providers out there trying to navigate purity culture with their people?
I think if we can get away from the focus of sex and really focus on pleasure
Mm,
and how, as human beings, we are all entitled to pleasure each day of our life, that we don't have to earn pleasure, and that
mm,
pleasure can look like so many different things. When we can focus on helping people believe and believe that they deserve pleasure and embrace pleasure, I think that that's the start, right? And then we can go to all these other levels. But most people, at least in this country, and I grew up in Papua New Guinea, so I have a different background, but at least in this country, in the States, it feels like to me that we believe that we have to work really hard to maybe earn a tiny bit of pleasure. Like, I get to go
hmm.
on vacation for 1 week a year, or I get to have a glass of wine at the end of the day. And instead of we have to earn pleasure, just knowing that pleasure is your birthright. And that, I think, for me as a therapist, is what I want every client, whether you're a sex therapy client or you're an anxiety client, I want you to leave my office knowing that that is your birthright.
Yes. Oof. Beautifully put, my friend. Can our listeners get in touch with you, hear more about your work, and what state are you licensed in so that people can send you clients?
So I'm licensed in Pennsylvania. I have 5 people that work at my practice. And so one of our clinicians, Dr. Benet Justice, who also went through our PhD program, she is also licensed in Florida.
Mm.
And then our sex and relationship coach, Angie, who is also my wife, she can work because she's a coach in any state. So we offer telehealth and we offer in person. We have a great website, which is www.andreajonescounseling.com. And we're also on Facebook. And then my book is being published in January, and it is for clinicians who are working with people from purity culture, and it's called Deconstructing Purity Culture to Embrace Sexual Pleasure. So I'm really excited for that to come out, and I'm hoping that therapists will read it and use it and keep changing the lives of people out there.
Absolutely. It will be once it's out, because likely this show will come out before the book does. Uh, Once it is out, it will be in the show notes. And this book is specifically for clinicians, correct?
Yeah, like everyday people could read it, but it's really for clinicians.
Yeah, y'all listen to that, because sometimes clients will go out there and read a book and they're like, none of this makes sense to me. I'm like, yeah, because let me give you another one. This one's not for you. But this show's for clinicians. So y'all, you're going to go get this book and support Dr. Drea or Dr. Dre. Come on.
That's right.
Thank you for being on the show. And folks, thanks for sticking around to the end. If you would like a CEU for this episode, please join us at TwoX Labs on our membership. We'd love to have you so that you can continue to see any of the conversations like this one and get all of the resources that we have there for you. Thanks for having all of the time with us, and we will see you next time.